Well, you're very, very welcome. This is our first webinar in the series of Keeping Sunday Connected. And my name is Graham Sandersfield, Learning Development Manager for St. Peter's College. And I'm also with Kieran, Kieran, do you want to introduce yourself? I think you're on mute, but...
Hi, yeah, I'm Kieran Malco. I'm Communications Officer for the Diocese of Sheffield. Fairly new in post, but that's who I am if you've not seen me before.
Yeah, Kieran's catching up very, very fast. He's just joined us fairly recently, so but got loads to do. So as I say, part of Keeping Sunday Connected, which combines a grant of up to £500, a webinar series and online resources, all aimed at keeping churches online, not just through lockdown period, but going forward into the future as well. First thing to say is we're not experts by any means, but we are very much committed to serving you, serving churches from the centre in just getting going with something like this, either live streaming, recording video, getting yourself out there online, either on a Sunday or midweek. We'll be focusing really on the live streaming components for setup, only because that covers a lot of different aspects, and also looking at our surveys that have come back, that's the thing that most people want to know more about, and so we're responding to your needs, if you like, but hopefully it also covers things like midweek prayer meetings, midweek meetings, as well as the Sunday live streaming, a Sunday experience of some kind. We'll assume most of you have had the chance to look at the page of information that was sent out. I know it's possibly too much information or not enough information, but we'll try to hit that middle ground of just providing an overview. If you haven't read it or watched any videos, that's totally fine, and we'll be unpacking quite a lot of it, hopefully allowing you, if you can try and find the chat window. Most people know where it is, but by now using Zoom a lot probably, but if you don't know where it is, it's usually hovering around the bottom of your screen on Zoom. Open it up and make sure you've got everyone clicked as the recipient of your chat, and then we can see your messages coming through. So what we're going to do is break it down into sections, and then give you the opportunity to ask questions about that section. So please throw it in the chat. Because there's 20 odd people, probably not easy to unmute and just shout out questions, but that might happen from time to time. We're not massively against that, but obviously we want to try and keep it fairly tight for time. So Kieran, I'll take 6 of the main elements of live stream and unpack them, try to answer specific questions that you have, and we're going to sort of alternate between each one, between Kieran and myself. So the 6 areas that we're covering are camera, audio, so that's microphones and a little bit of maybe connecting to mixing desk, hardware, so that really covers your computer, 1 or 2 other bits and bobs, software, what goes on your computer to help you get the stream out there, connectivity, so that's really your router or internet connection, and then platform, how to connect to, let's say, Facebook Live or that sort of thing, although we're not going to go into a lot of detail on that. And if you take any one of those elements out, the whole thing will probably collapse. So you do need each one of those 6 elements, in my opinion. We will be recording this. However, we're aware that some people may not want to be recorded. Hopefully your faces don't appear on the video. If they do, I'll probably, try and edit them all. But if you don't want to be recorded for whatever reason, that's very understandable, but just direct message one of us and we will make sure your face or anything doesn't appear, although that's not the intention. It's very much just to capture this as a training webinar and then put it online, certainly not to show people's faces or whatever. I should also probably say that I'm not a massive fan of live streaming Sunday services, if I'm really honest, which might sound a bit weird because this is what we're doing in a seminar or a webinar. But I sort of probably think a combination of video recordings is maybe a better process to go through. But we're aware that that doesn't always work for time. You know, it takes more time. You probably need a bit of a team to pull that together, to do videos throughout the week and push them into a sort of maybe a Facebook premiere rather than a Facebook Live. The positives of doing the video style thing would be it's less stressful, technically far less can go wrong, probably better quality, you've got more time to think and edit and that sort of thing. And it's much more directed to an online experience for the audience than more of a second-rate sort of distant observer experience of what sometimes happens with live streaming. But you know, you don't lose the interactivity of maybe Facebook Live or YouTube Live, where you can add comments, and Instagram Live, where you can add comments. The negatives of doing videos, obviously, is it takes more time. You may not have, if you're doing things twice, in effect, doing a sermon, let's say, to a video, and also doing a sermon on a Sunday morning. So that's why we're covering live stream, but does cover a lot of different things. Right, that's actually just the introduction. Sorry it's taken so long, but we're now moving into some I've done the welcome. Just to point out, if you haven't already seen the link, hopefully you have, but that's a great page that we're basing this talk on, keeping Sunday connected at the St. Peter's College site. That's the setup. If you've been to the page, you might well have seen it. That's basically trying to pull these 6 areas together. I'm not going to spend a lot of time, but you can see the camera, the audio goes possibly through a mixing desk, because we know that a lot of churches have mixing desks, but doesn't necessarily have to. Very much depends on the style that what you're trying to do. If it's a Sunday service and there's people in the building, you might want to use a mixing desk. If not, if it's just somebody talking to a camera, then you probably wouldn't use a mixing desk. You might use something much more simpler. Ideally, the audio should go direct into your camera, because then you're reducing the risk of lag. But then that camera goes into a video capture device. I'll explain this a bit later, and then into your computer, on which is maybe some software that you need to be able to live stream, and maybe add in some words like, you know, hymns or Bible readings. You need a decent broadband router, or at least a dongle of some kind, to be able to connect to the internet, and then you need a platform to allow people to view the live stream. So that's the setup. I know I've gone very quickly, but we're going to unpack those things. Camera, number 1, and then I'm going to stop and let people just fire questions in if you've got them. So camera, there's 3 or 4 different types that you could use, probably more. Again, as I say, I'm not an expert in all of this. Webcam, what's the just moving the video up a little bit. What's the thing about a webcam? Well, it's very simple, cheap, often comes with a PC, but I mean, like today, I'm not using my webcam on my PC because I don't like it. I think it's grainy. It's a bit horrible, but I spent about 50 quid or something on a webcam. So hopefully it's a little bit better. For one reason or another, just plugs into a USB, but very simple, plug and play. No battery problems like you sometimes have with, say, a DSLR, but not very flexible. You can't really pan, zoom, move it around. It's just fixed. Ideally, you know, you'd use it for a talking head or something. Camcorder, smooth zoom compared to maybe a jerky zoom of a DSLR. Sometimes when you're turning something, camcorders often have like a little button that you just zoom in and out electronically. Fairly cheap options, you know, 200, 300 pounds. I know it's all relative. That's a lot of money for some people. And, you know, it's not very much if you want a really good camera, maybe a cinematic camera. It's a tiny amount, but you can buy pretty good camcorders these days for reasonably cheap amounts of money. You got AC power, so you don't need to worry about batteries. Probably spend more money on your lights around you rather than buying a camcorder that adjusts perfectly to any light conditions. It's just generally cheaper that way, and you generally should have good lights for your church or whatever you're doing anyway. And just check your audio input is the right sort of audio input. So ideally an HDMI that goes into a video capture device later down the line. DSLR, I personally don't really like them, but at the same time, if you've got one, they're perfectly adequate and some prefer them. So I'm nothing against them, but I do find they're a bit jerky. There can be a limited battery life, although you can buy dummy batteries that act like a battery, but also you can plug in an AC adapter. So that's not usually a problem anyway for your DSLR. Smartphone, yeah, absolutely, you can use a smartphone. Generally, I would say, again, a talking head type thing, a little piece to camera, depends on the capacity of your phone. But a smartphone does everything. It's it's a video capture device. You can connect straight to a live stream, but as I say, not very flexible. And what I would say, if you are using a smartphone, is use again another microphone, because really phones are designed primarily as phones, not really as video cameras. And so if you add to it by using a microphone, it can make it a much better experience. And I would probably say very quickly that good audio is, in my opinion, more important than good video for the listener and the viewer. It's probably arguable, but I would definitely say if you're going to spend money, spend it on good audio. If that's all you've got, you've only got an amount of money to spend. Right. If there's no, please feel free to ask questions. Is there any, oh yeah, there was one at the end, which is a PT. Let's say PTZ, because most people say PTZ because it's an American, but PTZ. It stands for pan tilt zoom camera. Very expensive, but they're really, really good. And often they've got built-in video capture devices in the camera. There may be £2,000-3,000 or something, possibly less, but they're really good. And maybe look into one of those for your church, because it provides a good experience. Right. If there are any questions, if there aren't any questions, I can hand over to Kieran. I haven't seen any. Oh, how close to the action? Yeah, I've skipped through these these notes. Thanks, Pip, for asking that question. Yeah, a camcorder, I've said discreet, and I didn't really unpack that at all. I didn't even mention it. But yeah, a camcorder is much more discreet than, say, a webcam or a smartphone that might have to be much closer. Your camcorder, because depending on the quality of it, you can be much further away from the action. It's better for a number of reasons. And so you can be discreet. You can be to the side or to the back, and therefore try and have it as central as you can, because that's just a better experience for the viewer, rather than to the side where it looks like you're just not talking ever to the person on the screen. But yeah, that is a really important aspect to what you want to do with a camera, is how discreet it is and how far back you can go. And obviously discreetness, if you like, is dictated by how close you are to the subject. So, and a PTZ probably can do a very similar job to be able to zoom, which is what the Z stands for, tilt and pan all remotely. So yeah, great question. Connecting smartphone to a computer, streaming software, any views about using software like Droid Cam? I mean, I don't know about that, but I have had some experience of trying to connect a smartphone to a computer. It doesn't just happen naturally. You've got to work pretty hard at it, but it certainly can be done. And there's streaming, other different types of streaming software, or you can just connect direct to Facebook Live. Kieran, you might have a better view of that than me.
Yeah, I would just say the benefit of the smartphone is that you don't need the computer. And if you're going to go for that, it's a very simple pick it up and press the button situation. That's why it's fiddly when you come to try and use it like it was a camera that you plug into a computer, because it's not designed for that. It's designed to as a unit. If the only way to improve the smartphone, which we might go into, would be to add lighting, add a camera that goes directly into the smartphone. But in terms of the connecting the video into a streaming platform, you can do it all in the phone. So I'd go that way.
Yeah, great. And other questions? Any point getting high def? Spend a lot of money on a camera if your broadband's not very good? I mean, yes and no. I would say yes if your broadband's going to improve further down the line, which hopefully it will. These days, you just don't know. And if you spend, say, £200 on a camera that you could have spent and bought a better camera, then I would say, invest wisely for the future technology. But no, I mean, you've got to, all of these, that big setup we showed earlier, you've got to try and get them all as high a spec as you can. If one of them is poor, that's the one thing that's going to let you down. So I would probably say try and get better broadband, but I know what it's like out there. It's hard. Multiple cameras, yeah. We're going to cover that a little bit, but that's to do with software. Yes, you can use multiple cameras, absolutely. And you'd use something like OBS Studio to pull them together in order to mix the cameras. It's a bit like a BBC production where you're saying camera one, camera two. It wouldn't be that sophisticated, but you can mix the different cameras from different angles. I would try it. I mean, yeah, absolutely do it. What's the sound quality like on a camcorder? Well, rubbish if you just use the microphone on a camcorder, but Kieran will very quickly talk about that in the next session.
Will you take that as a point to transition?
Yes.
Is there anything specifically about cameras that's still there?
Our experience, one size doesn't fit all. Yeah, I totally agree. But yeah, pick the right camera for the right situation. I will pass on to Kieran. Audio. And I'm moving the slide on. There we go.
Okay, so because we did mention there just how much audio is going to improve that experience overall, and there's some questions. My rule of thumb I was always taught is get the most expensive microphone you can as close to the mouth as you can. So if we're talking about a camcorder being on a balcony, well, you're not going to want to use the microphone that's built in. But if it's quite close up, like this camera is to me, you might get away with it. We have other options though. Lots of churches may already have microphones for their usual Sunday experience, so they would probably be dynamic mics. You'd have them with their XLR cables plugged in to a mixing desk probably. The benefit of a mixing desk, of course, is going to give you levels and EQ settings. So what that means is you can tweak the audio if you getting technical, and that's how you can improve the sound, depending on whether it's a voice or different types of voice, different types of maybe instrumentation. Some of you might be doing. A great one for just spoken word is going to be your lavalier mic, which you may have seen on interviews. It just attaches onto the shirt there or wherever, because it gets so close. And actually, for fairly cheap, these do produce quite a decent sound quality. You can use one of these with a wireless transmitter or plug in directly either to the mixing desk or even better to the camera. Oftentimes, if your camera's close enough, you'll be able to plug straight in there. What that's going to give you in terms of benefit is sometimes if you're taking a signal a long way, either wired or particularly wirelessly, you might get a lag in the audio. So you see the mouth move before you hear the audio. So plugging directly into a camera is actually going to be your best bet if you're finding that problem. And then I just mentioned briefly in terms of the smartphone, you can get a microphone that will plug directly into an iPhone, an iPad, whatever smartphone. You may have seen some really good little setups actually where you can buy a rig and put a smartphone into a rig, which just means you can attach things to it like a piece of plastic with a handle. And you can attach a microphone directly onto that, pop that on top of your tripod or whatever you have. So that will greatly improve that smartphone video experience as well. They're your basics of mics, but like I say, you want to be as close as possible with the microphone. And if you can take a level, you can stick some headphones in. Some cameras can do this, but certainly mixing desks will. Make sure you set that beforehand. Make sure you can hear clearly. As with all of these things, it's test it all thoroughly before you go live. You don't want any surprises in the moment, but yeah, some cameras will give you audio levels. You can stick headphones in, particularly camcorders will do that, but a lot of the new DSLRs will do that as well. And that just lets you tweak those levels again and get a really clean sound. And the lighting and the sound are going to be really key in a video. I know it sounds a bit strange, but they actually do build that experience of video so much more cost effectively actually than very expensive cameras. So that's an overview of that.
There's a question there, Kieran, about memory on a smartphone. Because it's often quite low, isn't it, for video?
Yeah, obviously there's so many smartphones out now. It'll depend on your particular phone. Some of them can have an additional card in, an SD card, micro SD card, and you might need to check your settings as to whether that's being used as well, or can be used by certain apps, because some can't. But yeah, a lot of the more entry-level smartphones have a limited memory or storage. I'm assuming you mean storage.
I do, yes. If I said memory, I meant storage. Okay. Is that okay? Moving on. I haven't seen any more questions.
Unless there's anything you want to add, that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, if something crops up about audio as we're going on, just throw it in the questions. Totally fine. Hardware. So we've got your your camera and your audio sorted. Let's say. What do we do with the? I mean, if we just think video is, if people say a picture paints 1,000 words, well, a video paints 1,000,000 words probably. And there's so much data, so much information. How could it be possible to actually live stream it down a broadband router and all that? Well, it does need to be compressed and altered and changed. So getting your information into the data into your computer, you just need to capture it. And please don't ask me technically what on earth happens in that thing, but it means you can plug a camera into a computer and it recognizes this signal. And different video capture devices do different things, and obviously your computer is critical. Computer really needs to be quite a high spec for video. There's no getting around it, and for live streaming, it just needs a reasonable processor with a pretty decent processor on it. So an old computer will not do the job, I'm afraid. It needs decent storage capacity. That's your size of your hard drive, I suppose. Memory, which is your RAM. So that's the thing that holds. I mean, I'm not a computer expert. It holds stuff while it's processing, and so you need decent size memory. Graphics card is pretty important, as I say, processing speed, which is your processor. So there are some simple upgrades. Like I had an old Mac from 2011 or something, and I just put a solid state drive in it. Like I did it myself. Took about literally 10 minutes to do. Was very, very quick. Obviously, take a backup, but solid state drive is the difference. It just makes everything work a lot faster, just because you've not got a head traveling across your, like a CD, or it's not like a CD, it's a solid state drive. So it makes everything a lot faster. And you can also try and upgrade your memory, your RAM, which is like little sticks. Again, you take the back off your computer, you can drop it in yourself. So after those two things, you really, if you're still not got a decent computer, probably just get a new one. I can say that very quickly, but I know it's not always easy to afford these things. But if you want to live stream, save yourself a lot of headache and get a decent computer, unless you're doing it from your phone, of course, in which case get a good phone. Video capture device converts the video signal for computer. So you typically get an HDMI in, USB out, so your USB goes into your computer. If computers do have HDMI holes, if you like, jack sockets, don't plug your HDMI into that, because that's a HDMI output from your computer rather than input. Hardware versus software streaming encoder. So an encoder takes a lot of data and compresses it down simply. I've not put a picture of that. If you're looking for it, it's not on there, because we're sort of assuming a lot of you will use software streaming encoder rather than hardware. But your hardware encoder means you're not putting any pressure on your computer, or as much pressure on your computer, to compress this file down. So a hardware video encoder or streaming encoder is much better than software, because you're not using computer processing power. But they can be expensive. So, just bear all those things in mind. If you've got a computer and you've got software and it's a decent spec, then use a software video encoder, which I think Kieran's going to cover to a certain extent. No questions about that so far. Can't think of anything else to say on that. Anything to add on that, Kieran?
No, just I don't know if we've mentioned yet about the grant, so that might be on some people's minds.
The grant, what you're saying, you could use that to buy?
Just to bring it into people's minds that, of course, if you've not already applied.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
As we're going through these ideas, you might want to think about what that could be best used for.
Yeah, and we know some of you out there haven't applied for the grant, because there's more people on this call than there are that have applied for the grant. So if you haven't applied for the grant, get there. I mean, what you really want to do is make sure you know what you're spending the money on, and what your strategy is really going forward first, before you apply for the grant, because we will ask you those questions. But we're trying to make it as simple as possible. In some ways it's £500, but we really want to use that as a sort of a bit of a booster for you, and a sort of a token to say, look, we're really trying to support you. It all adds up to about £25,000 that we are putting towards this, although 50,000 in total, depending on on the next stage of a grant bid. Am I allowed to say that, Kieran? I don't know. But
Well, you did, so I don't know.
I did, but don't tell anybody. Whatever you do, please. It's totally confidential. What I've just said, even though I'm recording it. Right. So it's £25,000 is the no more. Definitely not.
Yeah.
Right.
And just so
Sorry.
just on that, the link, of course, is from that page, the same page, which is the Keeping Sunday Connected page on the St. Peter's College website, which I've linked to at the top of the chat. But we'll post out again at the end.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a couple of questions there.
Oh, sorry.
Prices of capture devices and an i7.
Yeah.
An i7's a good processor. So
i7, absolutely very good. I mean, anything i5 and above is usually pretty good. What sort of price capture device? I mean, have a look on the page. Really cheap, like £20 up to, you can probably pay what you want for it. And there's different inputs and outputs, and there's different, some are more robust than others, but you can do like really cheaply, £20 or so. Anyway, but you can spend more. Right, software, Kieran.
Okay, so
and sorry, one more, just sorry. Is that a Diocese of Sheffield grant? Yes, it is. It's coming out of a diocesan grant making fund that is set aside specifically to serve churches, although I'm not the right person to ask about that.
Yeah, that's right. So it's the project that this training's part of, which we've now called Keeping Sunday Connected, came out of some surveys, which some of you may have done, and a response to that, as the grants committee did set aside some money to help people with this online mission and ministry.
Yeah.
Not just now, but to keep it going after things maybe seem a bit more normal. Okay, so let's keep going. Once you've got your hardware set up, you want to run some software on there. Now, this is an area where there's a lot of different options, some paid, some free. Basically, the first thing that we kind of discussed already is you have some sort of encoding or mixing software. That is something you open up on your computer, it can see what's coming in, and it can tell it where to go. So it's usually, you can see the video on your screen, and then you can say, send this to Facebook Live, or send this to Zoom, or whichever else. Now, this is where it gets complicated. You open up, say, OBS Studio. You can add a pre-recorded video with your live webcam and a secondary camera. So those of you who are technically minded, who are good with this sort of thing, have a play around with OBS. And obviously there's vMix eCam as well, depending on what suits you. What this is going to give you is more control, but as we know, the more technical, the more control, the more time, the more resource, the more skill you might need. So again, this is about looking at that overall process. How do I get from camera right through to people seeing it in their house? So yeah, the thing with software is they can do a lot of different things, but it doesn't always mean, in my experience, that your team or you as an individual is going to be able to do that stuff. There's sometimes a learning curve, and do take that into account when you're looking at a list of features. It's not just about what it can do, it's about whether you are able, or your team or your person is able to learn to do that. And that might be something you need to consider when you're choosing one that can do a little bit less but is easier. Might be the best option for you, depending on your team and your skill set. So yeah, you've got the software that's to do with encoding and mixing that video. Because we're in a church environment, a Sunday service environment, you might also be looking at worship software, your Easy Worship, Pro Presenter, things like that. So that's where you're going to have your lyrics to the songs, or prayers, or Bible readings, or bringing in your PowerPoint presentations, slides. So again, these are some paid options usually. You might already have them, in which case you just want to check your individual software site and see how they're suggesting that you link in. We don't have time right now to go through every individual way of setting this up, but to say at this point, most software companies would have the advice on their website that I've looked at of how to set up best once you're onto the computer and you want to go to YouTube Live or you want to go to Facebook Live, and the various integrations there. Basically, again, it's just what you're comfortable with, making sure you've tried it out in advance, and got it running when you're going to go into a live environment. You want to make sure you're confident in that. The other side, of course, of software is those of you who are either capturing that stuff or you are doing it in advance, pre-recording your video content. You're going to need something to edit that, whether you want to put titles on, put some graphics on, or just cut in the right places and cut a few videos together. Obviously, you've got your Adobe Premiere Pro, your Adobe Suite. You've got something that probably comes with the laptop that might be on a Mac iMovie or on a PC. You've got a movie maker or whatever else it is these days. There is a free option, DaVinci Resolve, that's got quite good reviews. Again, as with any of these things, you're going to have some learning curves. So often there's a trial if you've not used this before, where you can have a little go, or speak to your team or whoever's the techie person. The video is a thing that a lot of people do as a hobby, so you might be able to rope someone into that as well. YouTube itself does have some editing capability. If you're going to publish to YouTube, you can cut videos together within that YouTube Studio, I think it's called. They keep changing the name of it, but yeah, you can add titles, you can add links, you can add slides at the beginning and end within YouTube itself once you've uploaded that video before you've hit publish. I'm sure there's loads of other options that I've not mentioned, but just to sort of recap, there's that software that's going to do that video capture and send. Where's it coming from? Where's it going? There's the how am I going to display graphics or words? PowerPoint for song words and readings. Yes, what you can do in OBS is you can open, just like you're seeing now, this is a PowerPoint on Zoom. So it'll grab whatever's on your screen. You can crop it, and so you just use it like you would on the computer, and that would be an input into OBS that you'd be able to send out as well. Again, test that, make sure you're comfortable with it. It looks a little bit technical when you get it set up, but it is possible. Yeah, so then you've got your Word software, and then also the pre-recording video editing. Well, it's endless. You can go into Adobe After Effects or create all your own graphics, or who knows what your budget is. But the simplest thing is you're going to cut a couple of little clips, put them together, and then export a video, and then you're going to send that off into YouTube or Facebook or whichever else. So that's a whistle-stop tour.
Wonderful. We've only had one question about PowerPoint, but I think you answered it. So I'm moving on, if that's okay. I mean, a bit of a shout out for DaVinci Resolve. Weirdly, I've never used it, but I've heard really good reports about it being a very good the free version of it, very good. So OBS is complex, quite agree. Streamlabs OBS is easier, both free. Well, thank you for that. I don't know, Kieran, have you seen Streamlabs OBS?
No, not any personal experience with that, but I can look it up.
No, anyway, it's great. Thank you for adding these in. DaVinci Resolve, I'm really pleased somebody's used it and says it's excellent. So that's good to hear. Can all this be done on the hoof or only pre-recorded? Well,
yeah, sorry, all this relates to the live stream as well. So, yeah. But you can basically mix these channels as you're going.
Yeah.
With a single output, or even it can go to both.
Yeah,
So,
OBS Studio does that. Presumably Ecamm and vMix do as well, but certainly OBS does. So it's good to hear that. I mean, I've looked at OBS. It is quite complex. I totally agree. There's a lot of settings, a lot of things to figure out. So if there's a simpler version of that, then fantastic. I'll have a look at Streamlabs OBS and stick it on the page. Right. Connectivity. I'm just looking at another question. We use Streamlabs to enable us to live stream to YouTube with less than 1,000 subscribers. Right. So the 1,000 subscribers YouTube. I mean, we will probably cover this in the 6th section. To stream from your app on your phone, you need 1,000 YouTube subscribers. So let's say none of you got 1,000 YouTube subscribers. We certainly haven't. But you can still stream from your browser on your phone. That's probably all I would say at this stage. But let's go on to connectivity. So I mean, really, I don't know. I don't know what else to say other than you need a decent broadband router or broadband connection through, in effect, the telephone network, or a decent data Wi-Fi dongle thing that plugs into your computer. If you haven't got that, you can. If you haven't got a good broadband, you could buy a data dongle, and that be good enough to live stream using the mobile network for a small monthly fee. I think if I'm honest, I don't really know. I mean, all I know is our broadband works. I plug it in, it works. I suppose the other thing to say is check. Oh, there it is. Check your speed. So if you're thinking, well, how do I know if it's any good or not? Use speed test. I mean, ours is about 20 or so megabytes per second. So I'm thinking 20 and above is okay, but you could maybe get away with less. But like my daughter got Sky Q, I think, and I went round hers to just plug it in and stuff, and it was 30, 40 megabytes per second. So you can buy it in as long as the infrastructure in your area is adequate. And somebody said they're using a £10 a month data contract because there's no Wi-Fi on site and it works okay. So wow, that's great to hear. £10 a month. It's an amount of money, but at least you know. I mean, you're going to be paying more than that for broadband anyway. So I don't know. I mean, I'm happy to move on. Yeah, I am quoting downstream, not uploading. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I'm quoting downloading, but your speed test does give you download speeds as well as upload speeds. Your upload is always way less than your download, so it's a very good point. Yeah, good. Platforms then, Kieran.
okay. Sorry, I've lost my spotlight. There we go. Great. So again, we've gone through, I guess, from beginning to end as you think about it, but really you do want to think about the whole process before you commit to one element or one purchase, because you're going to think, well, where are the people, where's the congregation, where are the people I want to actually connect with, and so that might inform your decision here as to whether you go to Facebook Live, YouTube Live, even Instagram. I think most people who are doing live streaming are going YouTube, in my experience. I don't know. I mean, certainly put in the chat what your experience is. But yeah, again, you do have that restriction on mobile in terms of your subscribers. So just in terms of live, what you do have is that sense of you're in a different space, but it's the same time. You know, that idea of If something's happening at that very moment that feels a little bit more connected, there's the idea that you know how many people you're talking to, you see the comments immediately. Facebook Live in particular, you've got these little, you can click a heart and it does a little animation, and I know lots of people have liked that during this time, that there's that sense of connection. So people maybe already are on Facebook, maybe not, that'll come into part of your decision. Technically, let's just say they're very well documented. If you go to Facebook Live, you go to YouTube Live, if you Google any of these, the actual setup process, the logins, the whatever else, is very well documented. So there's not much point us doing that right now. Only to say, if your page is live, people can watch it without an account. It's quite popular, so maybe some of you people are already on Facebook. You can sort of set up certain, like a watch party, you can set up it like an event almost. You can also do it within a closed group. So say if you want to use it for prayer or prayer meetings, we've done that with the prayer group. You can oftentimes use more than one at once as well, so take that into account, especially if you're using a mixer. You can set up a premiere. You can do this on both YouTube and Facebook. It's the idea that it comes up and people say this is about to happen. You might have seen this. So it's almost like it's almost like a film premiere. Like it's going to happen at a certain time. So at 10:30, this is going to happen, and you kind of can get a bit of buzz going, and people can get it ready, and then it'll give them a little ping if they've got notifications on to say that they're there, and you can sort of watch together. And then the video, it's staying available. This is the thing: if you're going for a live thing, don't forget that you want to reuse that content. So how long is it going to be available? What you're going to do with it after? You're going to promote it again. Again, we might talk about some of this stuff more when it comes to connecting with your audience in the Getting Your Church Noticed webinar, which will come later. The date's still to be confirmed on that one, but keep an eye out. So there's Facebook Live, and then YouTube Live, very similar in that the main difference is obviously the YouTube's a lot more accessible. Anyone can get a link and click on it. You've got that editing capability built in, and the video, YouTube is actually like the second most searched search engine. So you can think of it like that in terms of people finding your video. Google obviously is the main search engine online, but the second one is YouTube. So more people will probably find it if you're on YouTube. And obviously a YouTube live video is just going to stay there as a video afterwards. Yes, some people prefer not to be involved with Facebook, so that might be your option. And again, you can do premieres and watch parties and use multiple at once. I hesitate to go too much into the detail on this because again, there's lots of different options. Should we see if there's any questions?
There's just a bit of chatter about Zoom, and we haven't actually talked about Zoom, I guess, because we're sort of bored.
That's fine. We can do that. So obviously, if you're not looking at audience growth, which would be to say this is an external thing. Zoom, you need to know like this. We know everyone who was about to come because we had to give them the link. So if it's internal and if it's sort of you're mainly focused on the people you already know, then Zoom is absolutely fine. I know lots of churches have been using it and built their online sense of community on a Sunday around Zoom. It's primarily a meeting software. So if you think of it like a meeting, you can present slides, whatever else. I mean, just like we're doing now. Obviously, they've tweaked it. It's good for these kind of webinars and what have you. Think about what you want to do and what's your best solution. I know some people have been using Zoom well. They've got the breakout room function. If you want to break into small discussion groups or prayer groups, that helps. We said beforehand, if people are on here, we're on Zoom. so they probably know how to get onto a Zoom. Let me see if there's any further questions. Can you see anything, Graham?
I mean, just on people are saying about the ethical nature of Facebook, which is what we said in about YouTube. Some prefer not to use Facebook. You don't need a Facebook account, but you're not able to interact if you haven't got a Facebook account. Same with, you must have an Instagram account if you're using Instagram Live.
Yeah.
But
So
Zoom.
Elizabeth said about Zoom being disruptive. That's a good point. Make sure you checked all your little advanced settings. So if you're a host, you can mute all at certain points and make sure, like spotlight people like we're doing now. But there's lots of little settings. So you've got to think about how that's going to play out during the parts of the perhaps service or whatever you're putting on.
Yeah, and breakout rooms. I mean, we were talking our church meeting yesterday on Zoom, and saying breakout rooms. Some people have only just discovered them. I suppose I should point out on Zoom, if you've got the free account or the pro account, you can use virtually all of the settings. You use chat, you can use polls, I think. With a free account, I'm not sure about that, but certainly you can use breakout rooms, and people find that so much better than that sort of, say 10, 15, 20 people on a Zoom call, where it's very difficult to have a conversation. It's just one person talking like we're doing now. But in breakout rooms, you can have much more of it's more intimate, and you can do them randomly so that people just like get to know other people they don't normally do, or you can socially engineer it, I suppose, and just put people into specific rooms. But very quick to set up. If you do it randomly, you just press a button and off they go into rooms and set the number of rooms, and off we go. You'll figure it out, you intelligent people. So yeah, and some people think, I haven't got breakout rooms on the free account, but what you need to do is go to your browser settings in Zoom, not in Zoom itself, and go through all of the settings that you can change and update, and just see what you can and can't do on a free account. The only limitation on a free account is literally the 40-minute problem. That's about it. There's one or two other things, but mostly it's the 40 minutes. And with 40 minutes, it's not really a problem in itself, because you just reconnect to using exactly the same link to the meeting. Obviously, it's a bit disruptive, but sometimes it's nice to have a break after 40 minutes anyway.
Yeah. I mean, there's lots of information now, because this has been going on for a long time, about people's attention spans and things. So if you Google that, there's loads of good stuff, and there's podcasts and whatever else about it. 7 minutes, you want to change it up, either a different speaker, whatever else. That's your attention span online at the moment, just as a rule of thumb. I know that it might be different for different audiences, of course. People who are used to listening to a sermon are not necessarily your typical online audience, but keep that 7 minutes in mind and keep changing things up. I know there's potential for other discussion about content, but that's just something to bear in mind. Is there more question about Zoom? Oh, just the idea that actually, like here, there's two of us, so having a co-host on Zoom is really helpful, especially as the numbers go up. And also on YouTube and Facebook, if you have a volunteer and you say, please can you sort out the chat, please can you get people discussing things, post some questions, respond to people, say hello, so the person on the screen doesn't have to think about it. That's a really useful thing. If you've got someone else who can help you, even very simply by making sure they're on there and just moderating and guiding the chat, that can be really useful.
And somebody's just said 40-minute limit is suspended due to COVID. Well, I did not know that, so thank you for letting us know. So presumably for about a month or so, maybe, I don't know.
I've noticed it just carries on most of the time.
It didn't last night. I mean, I was on a meeting, we got kicked out twice. So I don't. It might be, you might need to update your version or something. Anyway.
Yeah.
Well, so we're almost there. I'm just gonna. have you said everything you want to say, Kieran?
Yeah, I think so. I'm just having a quick glance back through the
Yeah,
questions to make sure we've not missed
absolutely.
anything. I guess what we'll do is we'll take a copy of these questions
Yeah.
and then do any follow-up information, making sure we've covered this stuff, and get that to you in a follow-up email with any relevant links to videos or resources. And yeah, that I think that's enough to say.
So I'm just going to round it off with parish buying. Very good. They've actually got a. Let's move this slide on. They've actually got a particular page on audio or AV equipment. So I had a quick look. I don't know a lot about, but if you're in the parish buying scheme, then hopefully you can either save money, or if you don't save money, at least you know you're generally buying ethically. So these are the other webinars in the series of the Keeping Sunday Connected. So get your church notice online. Kieran and LJ, our communications director, I think she's been promoted. So I think she's head of communications or something now. How do I use social media to engage our community? All about building community, not about tools or online or whatever. It's about building community and staying connected. Refreshing online worship, that's coming up very soon. I've not put any dates on here, so go online and have a look. But they're coming up virtually all of them in November. So you've got to get on board. What can I do to enhance the worship experience in our service? A governance guide, I'm doing that one. Complicated, but there's a video on that I've done with our safeguarding training officer, Chris Herbert. So you can have a look at that. Creating teams, so that's all about how, it's difficult just to think, I need to do this on my own. It really is. So ideally get a team around you, and I know team might be just one other person, but ideally people who know what they're talking about and know what they're doing. Doesn't even have to be people in your church, but your church probably does have people around who want to help. Well, the clock's just ticked over to 11 o'clock, so we're bang on time.
Yeah.
Everybody's been very well behaved on the chat and not asked really difficult questions.
If there are any further questions, though,
yeah,
just in the next minute or so, if we've not mentioned anything,
yeah,
just type it in there. I'll copy that chat out and make sure that I go through it again to check for any gaps.
And you're free to leave, otherwise we can hang around for a few more minutes to answer any questions.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you very much. Hope to see you again on another webinar. Lots of thank yous. So no. Oh, looking at camera options. What's a good remote camera? Oh, I mean GoPro. Fantastic. Yeah.
The new one's getting a good reviews though. The competitor.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think GoPro used to have like price points at, what are they, like 100, 200, 300 or something, was it?
Probably starting at 2, I think.
200, 300, 400. And the top one is very good. But I don't know about Mevo. You sound like you know a bit more, Kieran.
Yeah, the reason we've not gone into too much detail on specific camera models, there are some examples in the introductory online advice on the web page, but it is, it's very much about your own solution. So you do the right thing looking at some test footage if you can get hold of test footage online. Sometimes the reviewers will put test footage next to one another, but certainly reviews that are not just are independent, and also reviews from someone like you. That's what I always like to do. When you're on Amazon and you look at the reviews and you think, okay, but who's looking to use it like I want to use it? That's basically what I do. The spec is important in terms of looking at the big picture. So obviously at the beginning we showed that diagram and the 6 elements we've gone through. If you realize that a GoPro can't connect in the right way, then it might not, that has to come into it as well. But yeah, it start by knowing what you want to get out of it, and then you know when you've sort of how close you've got. Even writing it down on paper, you know, drawing that flow chart out with your version of whichever route might be helpful for you. But there's loads of chat and forums and reviews on specific models. We can't go into each one, but
yeah, what I've found when I've been shopping for something like a GoPro is when you go into the shop, you've always got the like you know, an OLED screen and the best version of the GoPro, and you're thinking, oh wow, that's amazing. And you've got these skateboarders or skiers or whatever, like I've got to get one. And then your experience isn't quite as good as that, but only because you got like the cheapest version. But yeah, I mean, those portable cameras are excellent these days.
I guess the benefit of one like a GoPro might be if you want to put it really close to your speaker or to the pulpit, it's actually less intrusive when we get back to people in the actual building. You could stick that quite close without it affecting the service too much.
Yeah. Right, I think we shall go now if everybody's happy. Thank you very much again. Thanks, Kieran, for helping me out there.
Thank you, Graham.
Invaluable. Right, well, thank you. We're going to stop sharing and we're going to end the meeting now.